The first thing to understand about USCIS is among many of the immigration reforms that we've had since 1986, it's always been sort of like enforcement measures in exchange for green cards for a certain group. In one of those, immigration legislation moments, Congress decided that USCIS, their budget would come solely from the fees paid for by people requesting visas, requesting naturalization, requesting green cards. Obviously, the number of people doing all those things has gone, well, not all those things, requesting new visas and green cards has gone down. A lot of USCIS resources have been assigned to reviewing older cases, which means these are USCIS agents who are not generating money, because the agency, again, it generates money through applications and renewals. At the same time, naturalizations have gone up, but not in enough of a number to solve the agency's budget issues. And their budget issues came from before the Trump administration had sort of redirectioned it. The way they said they directioned it as an agency that protects American workers rather than as an agency that reviews visa and residency and citizenship applications. So their number one client used to be the foreign applicant. Now their number one client is the Trump administration's view of the quote unquote American worker. And now what's basically happening is, because it has been closed because of the coronavirus pandemic, and because so many of its resources have gone to non-revenue generating activities, it's going to go broke, essentially. Like later this year, at the end of the summer, if Congress does not inject $1.2 billion, which by government terms is crumbs, so it's like a drop of nothing, a drop in a bucket. If Congress doesn't inject this money, the agency will no longer be able to employ all its workers, and it's going to have to start furloughing some of the workers. People on both sides want to stop this. They want to stop it because so many visas are important to, like, the tech industry and the agriculture industry and just any number of industries. And also because people who are naturalizing and getting green cards have sort of been in line. It's very hard for immigration hardliners to argue against people who are sending in the applications the way they say the 11 million undocumented have not. This is a group of people who've done things the way the US government asked them to, despite it, it is a bureaucratic and complicated system by design. And now it's become a slow system just by the reduced capabilities of USCIS and really, frankly, the very extensive demand for United States immigration services in general. Trump ran on illegal immigration as a threat and on undocumented immigrants as a threat themselves. And he found the allies that he found to sort of navigate the American bureaucracy, who already had a game plan on how to reduce immigration. What were the groups that advocated for decreased immigration, legal and illegal? So those groups have been sort of, they've always wanted a reduced legal immigration system, but they never really had the numbers in Congress. That definitely never had support of the White House to do it. And frankly, a lot of the Republican Party, the ones who listened to the business community, the United States Chamber of Commerce, they were not their allies. So these were groups that were not necessarily Republican. They were very bipartisan groups. And what they've done is, through a lot of regulatory action, through changing what we were talking about with USCIS, through sending USCIS resources to do investigation for improper past practices or alleged improper past practices, because my understanding is they haven't found much. By channeling these resources and changing the regulatory framework, they've made legal immigration more difficult. And they have expressed as a target having less legal immigration. They want less immigration into the United States, period, no matter how it's coming. Politically, Trump at first didn't seem like he wasn't going to give them everything they asked for, the reductionist groups. But as they've become his staunchest allies, and really as his base has sort of winnowed down into the hard base, it seems that he's been left without too many political options, because backtracking on immigration, a lot of Republicans want him to, certainly, but backtracking on immigration at this point in an election year, when immigration is his core issue and his strongest allies are so one-minded about the issue, it would probably be bad politics. It's very hard to sell to his base, and it is something that his base has signaled that they are willing to break with him on this. You've had, like, for example, whenever he's not been strong enough in their view on immigration, he's gotten hit back by the likes of Ann Coulter and so on. So they are watching. They're very specific on the regulatory changes that they want, and really all of those regulatory changes just translate into making it more difficult, creating fewer spaces. When they went after chain migration, or so-called chain migration, it was really just a way to get rid of the diversity visa program, and of the largest generator of permanent immigration to the United States, the largest generator of green cards, which is family-based connections, people bringing U.S. citizens exercising their right to bring in their spouses or their parents or their siblings or their children.
It's interesting that I think that the Trump administration may not have quite understood the nuances in the American public on issues of immigration. So on the one hand, he mentions the wall every time he gets into this space, and he has a fair amount of support there, particularly among his base. I mean, he's in solid mainstream Republican territory. He talks about building a wall, and really most of the policies that are around keeping people out of keeping immigrants out of the United States. He has more support among his base for those policies. But I think what he's not quite calculated well is that on policies have to do with immigrants who are already in the country. The country is not nearly as anti-immigrant as the Trump administration's policies tend to be. Give you a couple of examples. So the Supreme Court, right, just upheld the DACA, the deferred action for those who are brought to the country as children, or going to college, or joining the military, and allowing them to stay in the country legally under temporary legal status. And that policy has nearly 2/3 support in the country, including about half of Republicans, about half of white evangelicals actually approve of that policy. We also have a policy, when you ask people about what should be done about the 11 million or so immigrants who are in the country illegally, and you give them three options, and you say, one, we should allow them to become citizens, provided they meet certain requirements. Two, we should allow them to become permanent legal residents, but not citizens. Or three, we should identify and deport them. You find that only about 15% of the country says we should identify and deport them. Like, it's a very small sliver of the country. And in fact, 2/3 of the country is in favor of the first option, allowing them a way to become citizens. And again, including half of Republicans and half of white evangelicals. And the one policy that's absolutely clear that the Trump administration went too far, even with their own base, is on the issue of family separation of children from their parents at the border. Majorities of evangelicals, for example, some of Trump's staunchest supporters, oppose this policy. They see it as anti-family. They see it as lacking compassion and cruel. And so I think that Trump has overplayed his hand, particularly around policies that have to do with how we treat immigrants who are already in the country today.
There is also the growing concern with COVID in detention centers on one hand, and that's something that the U.S. government can immediately do something about. That it can act on that and resolve it if it starts getting out of hand. Some argue that it already has started getting out of hand. And the other thing is COVID in essentially the refugee camps that have popped up on the northern Mexican border, the southern U.S. border. There's been the first cases of reported COVID, and the sanitary conditions in these camps. Let's remember, these camps popped up after President Trump changed the way the asylum rule, the Border Patrol reviews asylum applications, or pre-applications to be precise. So these border camps did not exist before, and they do exist now. So I think it's on the political side, it's very important. If anything negative happens there, it's not very hard for President Trump's opponents to pin it on him, because he sort of engendered their existence. It's if you look at it globally, the camps, the detention centers, the reduction of asylum, the reduction of possibilities for legal entry into the United States, you do have a very complicated humanitarian crisis that is, whatever, I mean, whether it's on purpose, whether somebody believes that, you know, the United States needs less immigration, the way that it has been handled has led to this crisis. And whether it and the end result is less immigration to the United States or not, it's problematic, it's difficult, and it's going to be very expensive to get out of. Whoever wins in November, however they fix things, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be very hard to get Congress to legislate on something when a lot of people, frankly, are very angry at this administration for the way it has treated these asylum seekers, particularly the asylum seekers.